Well, the first major domino piece this offseason has officially fallen, and who was the one to pick him up? Of course, it was none other than the Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Dodgers able to sign Blake Snell. We're going to react to it, vent a little bit. We're going to go through it here on the DNVR Rockies podcast. Welcome in, everyone, live from the Toyota Lounge. It's the DNVR Rockies podcast, and we have a big show to talk about here on the podcast, and we got a special guest to break everything down for us, or at least help break things down, make some sense of everything that's going on around the baseball world. Kevin Henry joining us. Kevin, thanks for hanging out with us.
Christian, always good, man. I'm good to see you and looking forward to the discussion.
Well, I am too. And look, the baseball world got treated to a pretty big news moment yesterday as Blake Snell announced that he signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers, 5 years, $182 million. So before I dive into anything on my end, Kevin, what was your initial reaction when you saw the news that Blake Snell had signed with the Dodgers last night?
I guess I should say I was surprised it was Snell, but I wasn't surprised the Dodgers signed somebody because you knew they were still going to be very active, being linked to Soto, being linked to so many other players, Sasaki. So not surprised it was the Dodgers, but was surprised a little bit it was Snell. I really did think he'd end up in Boston, honestly.
Yeah, no, I was too. And, Snell was an interesting situation. And actually, here, real quick, Alyssa, it was fixed just a second ago. It was, so whatever. And now it's back to echoing. When we do these interviews, sometimes the echo goes on in my ears. So Alyssa's working her magic real quick just so I'm not talking back to myself on a delay here every few seconds. But Here, let me pull this up because I want to pull up the contract. Because I think the interesting situation from this whole thing was the fact that the Dodgers continued to do what they do in deferring a lot of the contract. You know, he had a pretty big signing bonus, I think it was something like $52 million that Snell got his signing bonus with the Dodgers. But he also had a good chunk of his contract deferred as well. So explain to me a little bit about your thoughts on the whole deferred situation, because we're starting to see the Dodgers really lead the way in this free agent signing and deferring money deep down the road. We saw it with Ohtani. We saw it, with some of the other players. So talk to me a little bit about, what the reasoning behind deferring money like that is for the Dodgers.
Yeah, it really is a matter of you can do whatever you want right now and don't have to really pay the price. You're leaving that for years down the road. That's the thing that I think has stunned so many people in Major League Baseball. Of course, Ohtani was the big one to first really get this deferral, and we got really surprised of how the Dodgers worked that contract. But it is just pushing things down the road. And, some of the things that I've been reading this morning, of course, I've read both sides of the fence, but it really is something that one writer was saying how that any team could do this as long as you've got the capital down the road to actually pay it off. And that's where I think the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, some of these teams that have those TV deals that the Rockies simply don't have will have the opportunity to do it. Any team could do the deferrals. The Rockies, the Royals, pick a team. Any team could do it. But again, you're going to have to pay the price at some point and know that money's going to be there. And sadly, franchises like the Rockies, you don't know if that money's really going to be there to pay a Juan Soto way down the road.
Yeah. As well. And that's the situation, I think, where when you look at this deferred money situation, a team like the Dodgers, and we're going to get into some of the reactions across Major League Baseball in a second, but a team like the Dodgers is set up in a much different situation than teams like the Rockies, the A's, the White Sox, other teams that don't have the cash flow that the Dodgers do. I mean, if you're looking at, revenue that the Dodgers made, they made close to $700 million last year in revenue. The Rockies made, I think somewhere around $300 million or something like that in revenue. You're basically saying, like, we trust that down the road in the future, we're going to be able to have the cash flow to pay off this $900 million debt that we're going to owe across all of our players. So that's where it gets a little bit more complicated for smaller teams, small market teams like the Rockies, like the A's, like that kind of thing. And so I think it's hard. And again, we're going to talk about some of the reactions in just a moment. And I have some opinions on, the way I think this impacts some of the smaller teams versus the larger teams, why I think there is a bit of a gap between those teams, or between the different size of the markets between those teams. But is it safe to say that, yes, like teams like the Rockies or, smaller market teams can do these types of things with smaller players, but it's hard to say that they can go do that with a guy like Juan Soto, because you just don't know if you're going to be able to pay a guy like that. And as the Rockies are finding out right now, let's say you do go and you bet your franchise on a big named player and you put a ton of money into a big contract, and for whatever reason that player just doesn't work out. Well, you're in a hole now. The Chris Bryant contract, for example, has put the Rockies in a hole because you are now limited in your ability to make other moves to kind of expand. And whereas the Dodgers, if let's say Blake Snell gets Tommy John in his first year and doesn't pan out, well, they have enough cash flow down the road to bounce back from that.
They do, and enough of a talent pool as well. That's the thing. And you and I have talked about this a lot about, Chris Bryant not doing what Chris Bryant needed to do was a domino effect for the whole rest of the Rockies roster, the organization, everything else. And you're absolutely right. The Rockies could defer money down the road, but the next GM after Bill Schmidt is going to have to handle that. It's just like the next GM in LA is going to have to handle what's coming after Friedman is making all these moves. So I think it's a really fascinating economics lesson, but it's also something that if you can get players to actually agree to this. And, let's face it, Nolan Arenado, part of his contract is deferred. There's a lot of deferred money in baseball, but it's not at the level that we're seeing the Dodgers do it right now. They're just playing chess instead of checkers at the moment.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think it's interesting because, it shows the aggression that the Dodgers have. And I want to preface everything by saying I don't blame the Dodgers for doing this. If we were in the same situation that the Dodgers were in, we would do the same thing. And I don't blame Blake Snell for taking the contract either. Same thing with Shohei. I think the reason why a lot of people are upset is because it feels like it's not feasible for other teams like the Rockies or the A's or, smaller market teams, even teams that are good like the Guardians, to do and to replicate this. And so, I look around the baseball world and everything like that. The reactions, I think, are warranted on both sides. I can understand where people are upset. I understand why people are getting really worked up and saying, Major League Baseball needs a salary cap. Major League Baseball needs to, do all of these different things to fix this issue. And I could also understand people saying, props to the Dodgers for just taking advantage of a system that works for them. I think people's reactions are warranted in this situation. So I want to read through a reaction here, just a couple of them, and then I'll kind of get your thoughts on this. Ben Verlander, who's actually Justin Verlander's brother, who's also a Fox Sports reporter, he said, quote, baseball is by far the sport with the most parity in the U.S. Haven't had a repeat winner since 2000. Seems people are upset before they have a reason to be. Don't be mad at the Dodgers. Be mad at your team for being cheap. Ben Verlander, who's actually Justin Verlander's I'll give you my thoughts on that in a second, but what are your thoughts on someone saying something like that, and how do you react to that take on this situation? Haven't had a repeat winner since 2000. Seems people are upset before they have a reason to be. Don't be mad at the
And they're
Dodgers.
allowed-
Be mad at your team for being cheap.
Verlander, who's
I think we lost you there. Hold on. We're trying to get the audio worked out here, Kevin. One second.
something like that, and how do you react to that?
I can hear it. I can hear it beeping. Do you want me to try it without headphones, Alyssa?
Repeat winner since
Okay.
2000.
Yeah, we had you when it started, and then it's just been echoing back and forth since we got you. So bear with us, guys. Sorry for the delay here.
We're trying to get.
I just real quick while we're getting Kevin's audio fixed here. I want to kind of give my take on this while I let Alyssa work on the audio part of this real quick. Here's the situation for the Rockies, or for Major League Baseball as a whole.
Since we got
Again, I don't blame the Los Angeles Dodgers for making the moves that they're making, deferring the money that they're deferring, doing all of the things that they're doing. But when someone goes out and says, don't be mad at the Dodgers, be mad at your team for being cheap, I have a hard time with that because the system isn't set up for a team like the Rockies or a team like the A's or a team like the Twins or a team that makes less revenue. The system isn't set up for us in the same way that it is for those other teams. So when you look at how the Dodgers are able to do this, the Dodgers have almost a $700 million revenue income from TV deals. They've got obviously plenty of promotions and merchandise and all of that kind of stuff. Got $1 billion TV deal. Like, they make an insane amount of money aside from every other team next to maybe the Yankees in all of baseball. So they have more flexibility and cash flow to go out there and say, you know what? If this doesn't work out for us, if Blake Snell is a bust, or if Shohei Ohtani didn't pan out for $700 million, yeah, that hurts you, but it doesn't sink your organization. It doesn't completely put you in the red. You know you're going to have the cash flow down the road to be able to make enough money so that you can come back to be able to continue to make moves and sign players, do all of those kind of things. And before anyone jumps on me and says, oh, well, there's revenue sharing and, all of that kind of stuff that balances things out. Yes, that does help, but it doesn't make up for $1 billion in offseason spending. Just because the Rockies have revenue sharing does not mean that they're able to now all of a sudden go spend $1 billion in the offseason and defer $900 million of that. So there is still a gap between what the Colorado Rockies can do and what the Los Angeles Dodgers can do. And so I want to be clear here that yes, the Dodgers are fine in doing what they're doing, but that doesn't make it, fair in a way. I mean, I hate saying the word fair because that just feels whiny, but it really doesn't though, because it's not equal across all playing fields because of the differences in revenue between the Dodgers and the Rockies. So it's just an interesting situation. It's tough because obviously we're a smaller market team that doesn't have the luxury of spending of making almost $1 billion in revenue every year. But that's just the reality of this situation. So Alyssa, how are we looking on? Okay, Kevin, can we hear you all right?
In revenue between the Dodgers and the Rockies. So it's just an interesting
okay, I can hear you better now though. So that works. All right, so that was my take on things. I think we got you back.
Because one of the things that I looked back on whenever Snell signed last night was that Tampa Bay Rays rotation whenever they went to the World Series back in 2020 against the Dodgers. Snell and Glasnow were both part of that Rays rotation. And all of a sudden, at some point, the Rays said, you know what? We can't afford these guys. We're not going to be able to afford them long term. And so they had to give them up. And of course, now they're reunited of the Dodgers, a team that can't afford to spend long term. So while I understand why people say, well, the Rays are cheap, they could have done this. No, if you look at the finances of that franchise with everything going on in Tampa Bay, they could not kick the can down the road and afford to sign two guys, because then the rest of your roster would have gone into shambles. So I think that's where, as you were just saying, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, the teams that have this marketing power around the world, not just in California or New York, but, you go to Italy, China, wherever you want to go, and they're wearing Dodgers hats. So it really is a matter of using those marketing dollars then to supplement something that the Rays, the Reds, pick a franchise, won't be able to do.
Yeah. Well, and I get people's frustration with this, and I understand. Again, it's warranted. I think a lot of fans feel like it's the Dodgers versus everyone else at this point. Um, but I really don't know what Major League Baseball would even be able to do to balance this out. You can make the argument that there needs to be a salary cap, whatever. Like those, you can make the argument that there needs to be a salary minimum. Like there's all these different ways you can go about this. But I think in the end, you have to look back on the fact that Major League Baseball is a very profitable business, and the business model that they have right now is extremely profitable. So it would be nearly impossible for Manfred to go into a board of directors meeting and say, we're looking at making all of these changes across Major League Baseball to make things more fair so that a team like the Colorado Rockies, who are not going to have the same amount of eyeballs on them and value outside of just the Colorado area to Major League Baseball, we want to make it more fair for them and the A's and the Rays and all these other like kind of forgotten teams to be successful. Major League Baseball has something that's working right now. They're making a ton of money right now. They're making more money than the NBA when it comes to just on-field product revenue. Jerseys and that kind of stuff aside, Major League Baseball is extremely profitable. So yeah, we can say that there could be all these changes that can balance things out, but right now, what's working is the system Major League Baseball has in place. Yep. And I do think, if I go back to that comment that Ben Verlander made about, baseball is by far the sport with the most parity in the U.S., I do agree with that. Because we, as a sport, like the Dodgers are going to have this insane lineup, this insane rotation at the beginning of every year. And by the end of it, you still have to be able to win a 7-game series in a baseball game, where it's extremely, you could have Blake Snell completely, have an off day on the mound one day, and that just costs you your entire series. So it's the type of sport that balances things out, and it's the ultimate equalizer, I think, across all of sports.
Yeah, I mean, look at what happened to Aaron Judge in the postseason, especially when we got to the World Series. How much is he making? And because he couldn't function, it was a domino effect. Soto had his good moments. Jazz Chisholm struggled, but at least had some moments. There were guys in that lineup who did, but their big money player couldn't. And you're exactly right. Let's not forget the Padres had the Dodgers on the ropes in the NLDS as well. So, it can happen. There's no guarantee that you're going to spend $1 billion and it's going to automatically turn into a trophy.
Yeah. I saw someone make a joke on Twitter. They were like, beginning of every year, the Dodgers rotation is Nolan Ryan, Cy Young, Babe Ruth, all these guys. And by the end of it, you're throwing out, Tommy John post-surgery and all these kind of like half put together guys. I'm like, that's true though. Like, a bullpen game every other game. I'm like, and that's the way it's been. Like the Dodgers do roll out the best lineup in baseball every single day for the first 75% of the year. And then by the end of the year, it's like baseball catches up to you. The game, 162 game season plus all of the ups and downs of a year. Like that's the way it goes. Now, if the Dodgers go and win the next 3 World Series, then we'll be having a much deeper conversation. But as of now, there hasn't been a repeat champion for, 20 plus years. So I think, I do agree. Like we can be upset, but I also think there's, the Dodgers still have to go out and prove it. And I had said it, I think, to you on one of our shows during the postseason, where if the Dodgers got eliminated against the Padres, I went on record saying I think Dave Roberts' job would have been in jeopardy because of the expectations that he has. The Dodgers need to win a World Series every single year from here on out. Otherwise, it's not worth the money that they're putting into it. So we got to take a quick break, though. But after the break, I want to continue this conversation and talk a little bit about how do the Rockies find a way with the payroll that they have and all of that kind of stuff to make a system like this work in their context. I want to talk about that when we come back. But before we do, got to give a shout out to our friends, starting with Bet365, because at Bet365, we don't do ordinary. We believe every single sport should be epic. And right now, customers can choose a lot of different bets, different discounts, different deals. We've got a lot of stuff going on the Bet365 app. It's one of my favorite times of year to be jumping into the sports betting world. Specifically for me, I love betting on college basketball, and what a college basketball tournament we had out in Maui yesterday, or just these last couple days. CU actually getting the big win over UConn. I know our buddy Hank put some money on CU to take that UConn win, and I'm guessing that he took a pretty penny away from that game because CU was a long underdog to beat number 2 in the country, UConn, defending national champion, and they ended up doing it. So college basketball, one of my favorite things to bet on. And if you use the Bet365 app and you use promo code DNVR365, when you sign up, you can deposit either a $10 and choose between either a bet and get offer by placing a bet of $5 or more and getting $150 in bonus bets, or a first bet safety net offer by placing up to $1,000. And if your qualifying bet loses, you receive a matched refund in bonus bets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older, physically located in Colorado. Please gamble responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. We also got to give a shout out to our friends over at Toyota, because Toyota is the official vehicle of DNVR. And I don't know if you've taken a look outside recently today. If you've gone outside yet, it's a little gnarly out there. Shout out to all the people, including myself, who are going to brave the storm to travel or attempt to travel later today for Thanksgiving. But if you're getting out on the roads, you got to have a vehicle that can get you to and from wherever you need to go, no matter what the weather is. And Toyota has all of the vehicles that you could ever possibly need to be able to make the most out of seasons like this here in Colorado. They've got all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, tons of different options. You can go with the RAV4 SUV, Highlander, which is the car that I have right now, the Toyota Highlander. You got the trucks, you know, the 4Runner SUV, Toyota Tacoma with the trucks, the Tundra. So many different choices that you can navigate between all of the different options that you could possibly want with Toyota. All of them are great vehicles to have here in Colorado with all the weather that we have in front of us. So be sure you're ready for the winter storms. Make sure you head into a Toyota store and pick up a new Toyota. Visit your Front Range Toyota stores at a location near you. AutoNation Toyota, Arapahoe and Centennial, Corwin Toyota in Boulder, Groove Toyota in Littleton, Mount States Toyota in Denver, Stevenson's Toyota East in Aurora, and Stevenson's Toyota West in Lakewood. Toyota is the official vehicle of DNVR. All right, back here on the DNVR Rockies podcast. Just baseball writer Kevin Henry on the show with us. And so we kind of broke down some of the reactions from the Blake Snell move. And to be honest, it's still happening. I mean, I'm looking on Twitter, and it's just like people, the conversations, the blood is boiling right now for every fan base except for the Dodgers. And so I think it's important for us to kind of take stock in what that means, not only for a team like the Dodgers, but what that means for the other teams across Major League Baseball. And we kind of talked a little bit about, you know, how this pans out when it comes to, you know, the equity of this across all of the different teams around Major League Baseball. But let's talk a little bit about the Rockies. So the Rockies right now are in the process of cutting payroll this year, which, you know, they've already announced that they're doing, and they're already kind of shown us in some of the moves that they've made that they're doing. They're still trying to build a good competitive roster, especially one that can get competitive by the next 2-3 years. But given the moves that we're seeing across Major League Baseball, you know, Juan Soto's still outstanding at the moment. Does this change anything for the Rockies? I would imagine it doesn't, but I got to ask, does this change the approach for the Rockies, or is this just white noise and business as usual for the Rockies to kind of stay the path and keep moving forward?
My opinion, I think it's white noise. I don't think you're ever going to see the Rockies in competition to bring Juan Soto in. And I think that that's where the Rockies have to lean into what they have as an advantage. You know, if you look at Twitter during, or X, shall we say, during the regular season, you know, the Dodger fans are constantly whining about their team having to play at Coors Field, as does every other team. It's on the moon, everything else. You know what? If that's going to be the case, and this is the advantage in technicality the Rockies have, they need to lean into it. They need to play softball games out there. If they win 20-19, so be it. But beef up the offense. You know, if it's really going to be something that this is their one advantage, make sure that your hitters are actually taking advantage of Coors Field for those 81 games. That's really how the Rockies are going to be competitive, is really winning at home and making sure that Coors Field is actually a weapon.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Well, and you know, I mean, there's always those jokes that circulate around this time of year when the Dodgers, the Padres, even the Giants are making moves, and everyone's sitting there saying, "Can we move to the AL Central? Can we get out of the NL West?" And I agree. I'm right there with you guys. Like, the NL West is brutal, man. It is a brutal conference to be in right now. But, the Rockies aren't moving divisions anytime soon. So we're stuck in the NL West. I had said it on, a show almost a week ago. I had Noah on the show, and we were kind of looking at, the 2026 projected lineups, given what we know today, and saying, can the Rockies be competitive with the team that they have, in 2026, not including any, moves that we don't know about yet. But I think, when we were evaluating that, neither Noah nor myself or any fans who chimed in were sitting there saying we're going to win the NL West with this. You're really talking about, can you get a wild card series out of this lineup? Because the NL West is just such a dominant division that you're really expecting yourself to be able to compete in the wild card. So, and I'm okay with that. Like if the Dodgers own the NL West, so be it. We're all in that same boat. The Giants, the Padres, the Rockies, the Diamondbacks, like we're all sitting there feeling like the same thing when it comes to that. So I think if we're the Rockies right now, we're not looking at, who's winning the NL West, even a wild card next year, although they're going to say that they're going to try to do that. Realistically, though, our goal next year is how do we build a team that can springboard ourselves into 2026? How do we build a foundation that encapsulates our young guys and gives us an opportunity to build a better team that is competitive for a wild card by 2026? I really do see next year still being that stepping stone year for the Rockies. And I think, and we're going to break down some of these moves here in just a second, if you're looking at some of the moves the Rockies have made over the last few days, few weeks, they're kind of showing that that's their plan too.
Yep. They are absolutely going to lean into the youth this year. And I think for a lot of those players, it's really going to be a sink or swim year, because you're absolutely right. The Rockies are not going to compete for the postseason next year. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm surprised come July and they're buyers at the deadline and all this stuff. That would be fantastic. But with the roster they have right now, looking at the rest of the teams just in the NL West, not the Braves, not the Mets, nobody else, I just don't see a path to the postseason next year. So you've got to see what pieces next year are really a part of, as you said, that springboard, and looking to see how 26 you make the best possible team.
Yeah, so let's get into some of the moves that the Rockies made, because the moves, after my last show last week, the Rockies non-tendered Brendan Rodgers, Cal Quantrill. They picked up Kyle Farmer. They obviously also re-signed. Was it Gomber that they re-signed as well? Am I correct in that? I don't have that out in front of me, but they made a couple moves. But I think the biggest question mark for a lot of Rockies fans, aside from the frustration of not getting anything from Brendan Rodgers and Cal Quantrill, but especially Rodgers, was, well, you go and you get rid of Brendan Rodgers and then you replace him with, Kyle Farmer, who it's like, how does he fit into this situation? How does he look in this Rockies youth movement and all of this kind of stuff? And I really, from what it looked like on the outside looking in, to me, that move was a very temporary placeholder move that said we're going to cut a little bit of that salary from Brendan that we would have had to pay Brendan Rodgers off. Farmer's a little bit cheaper than Rodgers would have been. He'll hold down that spot, and we're just going to kind of have him there in case we need him. But we're going to use this as an opportunity to basically let one of the young guys earn it, and then we'll get rid of Farmer, after one of the younger guys earns it. That was kind of my take on this, but that, in my eyes, kind of proves that next year, although Bud Black's going to say we hope to make the playoffs next season, as he should say that every single year, realistically, if you look at the move, like next year, I think the Rockies are also looking at it as a springboard year for the youth to kind of organize themselves, get some roster pieces figured out, and then they can attack it in 2026.
Yeah, Kyle Farmer is Jake Cave. I mean, yes. That's who he is. He is that veteran that Bud wants to have on the lineup to give him that versatility, that flexibility, but also that MLB experience as well. And you and I think, talked about this a few podcasts ago. They need somebody to push Aaron Schunk to say, look, if you're going to be our utility infielder, here's your competition. Can you beat this guy out? Can you actually show us that you're worthy of a roster spot as well? So they're already rolling the dice to say to Schunk, this is your time to prove it. And as you said, Farmer's a placeholder to see when Amador is ready and if Amador is actually capable of taking over MLB second base position. He didn't really show that much the first time around, and very small sample size, very small. But absolutely, Farmer gives them a utility infielder with the possibility of, if Amador isn't ready or isn't the guy, who can be the guy in 26?
Yeah, and I think, emotions aside, that's probably the right way to go about it, because you can't really, you shouldn't, sit there and say, well, Chunk, it's your position and it's just between you and Amador, between two guys who haven't proven themselves yet, because there's a possibility that neither of those guys pan out. I would love to not have that possibility, but there is. Chunk looked better at the end of the year. His bat still needs to pick up, and then Amador is the same way that you kind of just mentioned. So I think you give yourself a little bit more padding. You also picked up Owen Miller, who is not on the 40-man roster, but is another one of those pieces that could jump in there if you needed. But all of that to me was just leaning towards the fact that they were going to move on from Brendan Rodgers. Unfortunately, they had to move on from Brendan Rodgers in a way that I wasn't really expecting them to move on from him. I really thought they were going to be able to get something from him in a trade value or even just a package deal or something like that. But yeah, I want to break that down in just a moment. We got to hit another break. But I do want to talk more about the Brendan Rodgers situation, because I think a lot of fans are really frustrated about how this whole situation turned out with Rodgers. And so I kind of want to get more of a business-like take on this, from a GM perspective, if we'll kind of put on our GM glasses and approach it in that way, and we'll kind of break that down here after this break. But before we do, got to give a shout out to our friends over at Coors Light, because right now Coors Light is the most refreshing light beer out there on the market. My personal favorite light beer. We always love having some Coors Light. I know I'm going to be bringing Coors Light to the family Thanksgiving because, we always got to have some representation for the family Thanksgiving. And, and Coors Light goes well with anything, whether it's Thanksgiving dinner and you're watching football after the Thanksgiving dinner, drinking a nice Coors Light, or you're coming out to the DNVR bar later tonight to go watch some Nuggets and Avs, and you want to, also pair that with a nice cold, refreshing Coors Light. It goes well with anything. And I always say too, just because it's cold outside doesn't mean that, it's not still a good time to enjoy some Coors Light. It is truly the most refreshing light beer, no matter what the weather is like outside. So embrace that chill mindset, crack open a nice ice cold Coors Light, make the most out of the times you choose to chill. And also you can get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with using Instant Cart by going to CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company in Golden, Colorado. Well, we also got to give some love to our friends over at Empire Today, because if you are in the business or in the market to get your floors replaced, whether that's at home, at work, wherever you need new floors, Empire Today has you covered. They are the best in the business. I know I've said it before, but they're really doing a great job helping my wife and I, get our new floors set up before we move into a new house. And so they've been great. Their customer service is incredible. Their speed is great. They've done a great job of making sure that not only I'm happy about the floors, but also that my wife, who makes all of the decisions in our household, she's extremely happy with things. And the best way they've gone about doing that is they use this thing called the Virtual Floor Designer, which allows you to take a picture of whatever your living space is or wherever you want your new floor to go, and you can see via the new amazing world of technology, you could see what that new floor could possibly look like. So you can choose between styles, colors, all of that kind of stuff with their Virtual Floor Designer. It's a really great tool. So a lot of good stuff that Empire Today does to make getting a new floor even easier. So schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners of this show can receive $350 off when you use promo code DNVR. Restrictions apply. See EmpireToday.com/DNVR for details. All right, back here on the DNVR Rockies podcast, and we're talking a little bit about this non-tender of Brendan Rodgers, Cal Quantrill. Came as a surprise to some, to many, I think, in the way they went about it. But this is the second time, I think, at least since I've been here this year, the second time the Rockies have kind of missed out on trade value for players that you had expected to have gotten more from. I go back to the July trade deadline where they ended up having to DFA Elias Diaz, a guy who, yes, had struggled a little bit last year, but was an all-star, the all-star MVP the year prior to that. And you felt like, okay, there are some teams out there that could be in the market for him. Is there a way we can make a package deal to get Diaz somewhere. The Rockies ended up not being able to get any takers, and they ended up having to DFA him. Now you see Rodgers, a guy that during the trade deadline, or even over the last couple of years, the Rockies have kind of put out there like, hey, we're bouncing around this idea that we want to trade him. But in the end, they've ended up just kind of saying, you know what, we're just going to hold on to him, or we didn't get the deal that we wanted. And then push comes to shove, offseason comes around, and you got to clear money out to cut payroll. Now you had to get rid of Brendan Rodgers for nothing. I think fans were warranted in being a little frustrated with the way that things were handled in that. But I do think it was the right move in the end for the Rockies to move on from Brendan Rodgers, given that they were cutting payroll and, he was going to take a pretty penny. Same thing with Cal Quantrill. But does this feel like it's kind of repetitive, in the case of the Rockies, of just not being able to capitalize on the value of players when they should have, over the last couple of years or even the last couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to John Gray, it goes back to Trevor Story, It goes back to, I mean, pick a name from the past, and it's the same story, and I think it boils down to that the Rockies have these very high ideals of what should come back in return, and if they don't meet those, then the conversation just ends. And then you end up with guys who leave or are DFA'd or non-tendered, and you don't have anything. I think Rockies fans would have been disappointed with a high A player or something like that for Brendan Rodgers or Cal Quantrill, either one. But still, it would have been something. And I think that the Rockies have done a really good job whenever they traded off Moustakas and did some of the trade back at the deadline. Those guys that they got from the Angels, they really promoted as these guys are good pieces for us. And Van Scoy's been decent. Victor Vodnik, of course, has stepped in. There's a lot of guys they've got in those trades that were worth something. And I still think something is better than nothing. And I think that's what Rockies fans are more upset about than anything else.
Yeah, and I think that was where it was it's like, I thought, and I think, again, I had said it to you when we had talked about this a while ago. It's like I feel like the Rockies could have at least packaged Brendan Rodgers in a deal with another team. And I know it gets complicated in that because you start having to put moving pieces and, there's a small few players and teams that want to even send players to Colorado. So I understand all of that. I just think it does leave a sour taste in your mouth as Rockies fans, and I understand why Rockies fans are frustrated. Now, looking forward, though, I think this was the right move for the Rockies because you don't need Brendan Rodgers to be your second baseman anymore. He isn't the future second baseman for the Colorado Rockies. And so you needed to be able to go kind of cheaply get a guy like Kyle Farmer who's going to be a placeholder for less money, save you a few $1 million off the books, and make more of a competition between Amador, Shunk, and whoever else, can step up in that second base position. That to me is the step in the right direction for the Colorado Rockies. However, I want to be careful, and I mean I have no say in this, but I would love for the Rockies to be careful at not making these same mistakes moving forward. So our friends over at Purple Row, Renee Deschert and company, put out a great article today, or maybe it was yesterday, saying, who do we think the Rockies should trade next? After the whole Brendan Rodgers thing, it should be Ryan McMahon, and then they put in parentheses, but they won't. I double down on that. I agree. I know fans love Ryan McMahon. I totally understand. I also enjoy having Ryan McMahon in a Rockies uniform. But it feels like he's starting to slow down a little bit, at least offensively. And I just am worried that this situation could turn into another Brendan Rodgers situation where you're like, hey, he was good for years at Colorado, but we held on to him for way too long. And now, we're just kind of holding on to this big salary and we can't get anything from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should be worried about German Marquez coming back from,
another great point. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of guys that you could point back to and say, my God, look at that run he had here. But that's been 2 or 3 years ago that they had that run. And absolutely, we love Rymack. And Rymack can get on those heaters. And, man, that left-handed swing is so sweet. But at the same time, I think that this is a year for Mac that he has to show that the strikeouts aren't going to be the thing that defines him. And I think this is really the year that they've got to say, look, if it's not you, depending on how fast the prospects come up, depending on, what all is going on in the minors, I think that Brymack has to show this year that he's a guy, or it could be, we may be talking about this a year from now, that they had to non-tender Mac or DFA him.
Yeah.
And I think that is a real possibility.
And that would feel so much worse. I mean, we love Brendan Rodgers too. Again, we had so much high hopes for him, but I think Rymack, given what he's done with his time with Colorado, that would feel so much heavier in my mind if they had to have the same situation happen to Rymack. So it's just such a tough situation. I also think there is some guys in the minors that are pushing hard to get into that third base role. The guy who, was your top draft pick last year, and Charlie Condon, who's slated in the third base position, also an outfielder, mix, but he's a guy that could, if he gets hits his stride a little bit, he could be pushing, his bat could possibly be pushing Rymack out of that position too, if Rymack's bat isn't able to come back next year. So there's just a lot of variables there with the whole Brendan Rodgers situation, but again, I think it was the right move. But if you look over at Cal Quantrill, I think not a lot. There were some people who I think were a little misinformed about Quantrill's lack of success this past year. But for the most part, people were pretty understanding of Cal Quantrill, like the move that the Rockies made. I think it was the right move. The Rockies pretty much saved themselves $9 million moving on from Cal Quantrill. He didn't have the success that we were hoping he would have, or at least the consistency the Rockies were hoping that he would have last year.
Yep. But
now if you look ahead, where do the Rockies go to replace Cal Quantrill? You've got guys like Bradley Blaylock. Do you turn to like Tanner Gordon? What kind of guys do you fill that role with? Chase Dolander is another guy you could throw out there as well. Yeah. This could be a year where we see, without Cal Quantrill, we see Dolander make his Rockies debut a lot sooner than people might expect.
And I think that was the message with Quantrill being gone, is that it's the same thing. Look at Kyle Farmer as a placeholder. Look at Tanner Gordon, Bradley Blaylock as placeholders for Dolander to come up, for Sean Sullivan to get there eventually. All these guys that are knocking on the door for the rotation, I really do think that was what was behind the move. And so in a weird way, maybe we should be excited that Cal Quantrill was deemed disposable, knowing that these guys are coming up. And I really don't think it's going to be too long that we see Dolander come up, because I think they want to see a big sample from him this year. And it could be a Memorial Day thing, who knows? But I do think that's very possible.
The situation in which I would sit back and react very negatively at the end of next year would be if we get through an entire season and we only see Dolander a couple times at the very end of the year, something like that. Like I get, you're still developing him. I know he's working a lot on his slider right now. I understand the Rockies have a tendency to be slower to commit to some of their young guys. I do see that shifting recently. I think they're Bud Black and company has gotten a lot better at like committing, or at least allowing some of their young guys to jump up to the big leagues quicker than usual. But I do not want to be sitting here in the month of August saying we're getting our first look at Dolander, and we have, a month left of baseball. I really think there's a world in which, especially if the Rockies jump out of the gate and kind of struggle like they did last year, I think there's a world in which we see Dolander within the first 2 months of the season. And I don't think that's unrealistic to think that, because you're right. Blaylock, I would love to see him become a stable piece of the starting rotation. I don't know if Tanner Gordon has what it takes to be that stable piece. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. But I think if the Rockies starting rotation, which still holds a lot of question marks in my mind, struggles at all, I think the Rockies are going to want to slap a Band-Aid on that really quick. And I think that's going to mean committing to a guy like Chase Dolander, maybe even by the month of May. I wouldn't be shocked. And I think Rockies fans would love that.
Hey, look, and I am not saying Chase Dolander is Paul Skeens, okay, before I even say this, but Pirates call up Skeens in May last year, and what happens? He changes the whole dynamics of the Pirates. All of a sudden, he becomes that must-watch TV. And I think that MLB teams learned a lesson from that, in the fact that, you may not be a postseason contender, but all of a sudden people want to watch you. People are talking about you. And I think Chase has that ability to be that guy if they bring him up before Memorial Day like the Pirates did Skeens last year.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. And we're talking about next year being a year that can be a springboard season for the Rockies and, a step in the right direction. What does that look like? The Pirates didn't make the playoffs last year. They were not a playoff team. But Paul Skeens changed the entire narrative of the Pittsburgh Pirates organization and what the Pittsburgh Pirates look like and what they could look like for years to come. Because now the Pirates, especially when Skeens is pitching, are must-watch baseball. And so, again, not to say that Paul Skeens and Chase Dollander are the same guys, but, this is a situation where if the Rockies can bring up a guy like Chase Dollander and he starts to do really well, even if he's pitching 6 innings of, 2-run baseball, like that's enough for Rockies fans, for myself, for you, for the organization to feel good about how things are progressing with your pitching rotation. So again, next year, not expecting to make the postseason, not expecting to be, in the conversation for a wild card even. But if you could take a step in the right direction, maybe be competing with the Giants at the bottom of the NL West, being over 500, having some pieces organized, that to me seems like a step in the right direction. And Chase Dollander might be a guy that can help you with that. But I got to hit our last break here. But after the break, I do want to highlight another one of those guys that hopefully might have a good bounce back year next year, and that is Mr. Nolan Jones. We're going to talk about him for a little bit when we come back. But before we do, got to give a shout out to our friends over at Game Time, because there has never been a better time to be a fan of anything than right now. And with Game Time, whether you want to go to live concerts, sporting events, live theater, whatever you're into, Game Time, they've got you covered. They are the best place to go get your tickets. They've got this awesome feature in the app called the Game Time Picks, which filters out all the excess fluff and all the extra stuff that makes it annoying to go buy tickets. And it makes it easier to go buy tickets. You can get cheap tickets close to the game, close to the start of the game. So if you're going to a Nuggets game or an Avs game or a Broncos game on Monday, you wait till a few minutes before kickoff. If they're not sold out already, you can buy some cheaper tickets before game time happens. So Game Time really is an incredible app. It makes it easier to get tickets. They also have a 360-degree panoramic view, which is great because you want to make sure you're not sitting in front of a pole or you're not sitting up, in a section where you can barely see what's going on. You want to be able to get the most out of your tickets when you spend your hard-earned money on those tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Use the Game Time app, create an account, use code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create an account, redeem code DNVR for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, we also got to give a shout out to our friends over at Raising Cane's because it's lunchtime here. It's 1 o'clock. It's still the day before Thanksgiving. It's not really time to pig out on all the turkey and mashed potatoes and stuffing and all that. And so if you want to have a nice, enjoyable lunch, meal, dinner, whatever you're into, Raising Cane's is the place to go. They have the best hand-battered chicken fingers there is. Their cane sauce, their coleslaw, their chicken fingers. Oh, my gosh. It's incredible. So good. I might have to grab some on my way home, or I might even have to convince my wife on our way out to the airport tonight before we head out to visit family. Maybe we'll pick up some Raising Cane's. That sounds like a good plan. Never a bad time to enjoy Raising Cane's. So find your local Raising Cane's location or order on mobile or online. You can get things shipped to you. That's incredible. I mean, technology, again, best thing ever. For cook-to-order, hand-battered chicken fingers, race into Raising Cane's. Turbocharge your chicken fingers and get them even faster by ordering online at raisingcanes.com or through their mobile app. Raising Cane's chicken fingers, one love. Back here on the DNVR Rockies podcast, we got a comment in the Toyota chat. Salsa Wolf says, "Wow, I didn't know the Rockies had any fans." We're still out there. We still exist, especially this time of year. We might go into hibernation, I would say, around this time of year. It gets a little cold outside. It's not really baseball weather, but anytime the Dodgers make a deal and gives us a chance to complain about how the baseball world is unfair, and we as Rockies fans, we're optimistic about the future. We'll take it. We're hanging in there just like the rest of them. We're enjoying it.
Absolutely. You know what? I mean, and wait, winter meetings aren't that far away. Let's be honest. We're only a couple of weeks away. And so there's going to be some Rockies talk coming out of that. Bill Schmidt will have his gatherings, and we'll all be listening to what's being said there. So
are you going to the winter meetings?
I will be in Dallas for winter meetings. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, actually.
Nice. Yeah. I know we haven't quite decided what our plan is for the winter meetings yet, but I know it's second week of December coming up here in Dallas. I had talked to some of the Rockies, communication staff, and they were kind of getting us, figured out for what types of things they're going to be offering. I know Bud Black's going to be talking. Bill Schmidt might be doing a little media availability, that kind of stuff. So, if you guys have some questions, send them our way. As Salsa Wolf says, you guys must love bad baseball. Well, hey, you got to be bad at some point in your life, before you can end up getting back to being good. So we're just taking it one step at a time here. And I was talking to some of our other guys here who've worked at DNVR for a long time, and they used to cover the Nuggets and the Avs and all that kind of stuff. And I was talking to Harrison, who covers the Nuggets, and he was saying, when he started out covering the Nuggets, the Nuggets were terrible. And not only were they terrible, but they were the joke of the NBA. It was just this flyover state. Nobody cared about the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets were a joke of an organization. It just sucked. And he's like, and we're sitting in here. He was saying, we're sitting here getting in fights with Woody Page about, why we're even covering the team in the first place. And then, hey, 7 years later, 6 years later, here you are, and the Nuggets are NBA champions. They've got a chance to go back to the NBA championship, this year if things keep going the way that they're, going, although we forget about what happened a couple nights ago. So it's just the way sports is. We'd love to sit here and say that the Rockies are going to be a World Series team next year. We're the best team in baseball. That's not the reality of it. And, there's still plenty of Rockies fans out there that love baseball. And despite all of the struggles that the Rockies have, still love going to Rockies games. And one day, when the Rockies become a Rocktober team again, I stand by this statement. It will be the biggest thing in October in the state of Colorado. When Colorado Rockies go back to the playoffs, it's going to take over the city. It'll be unreal. So we're here for that when that happens.
When it does, it's going to be amazing. I'm telling you. Because, Denver is a baseball town. Don't let anybody tell you it's not.
I know. I get it. I understand. We have one of our markets covers the White Sox, and they're in the same boat. What are we doing right now? How are we? We just had 150 million losses last year. How do we bounce back from that? But that doesn't mean that White Sox fans don't exist. White Sox fans are still out there. Rockies fans are still out there. Again, we just kind of go into hibernation for a little bit and, wait for the Rockies to do anything. But let's talk a little bit to wrap up the show about Nolan Jones, because Jones is one of the big question marks for the Rockies next year. He had a pretty tough year last year. He was bouncing back up after a monumentous rookie season, rookie of the year campaign in many people's eyes. And then just came back last year, had an injury, obviously, then had the birth of his daughter, who, reading through Patrick Saunders' article that just came out, incredible article, by the way, if you haven't seen it, go check that out on the Denver Post. But talking about some of the health complications that his daughter went through when she was born, and dealing with that, the human element of baseball, which we forget a lot. It's safe to say that Nolan Jones, it was an off year for him. It was a tough year, both mentally, physically, emotionally, all of that. But I will say, reading that article from Patrick Saunders, seeing where Nolan Jones was at headspace-wise last year, again, understandably, it gives me some hope that hopefully next year he'll be able to kind of wipe the slate clean a little bit, be healthy. Hopefully his daughter is doing okay beyond baseball. And he can, get back to being the Nolan Jones that we were so excited about his freshman year with the Rockies.
Yeah, Nolan is one of those guys that he is honest at standing in front of his locker to a T. And you could tell last year, he came out and said he was a bad player. He wasn't playing well and wore it, and it started early, those errors in Chicago in April, it started very early for Nolan to have that rough season. And so I think for him to bounce back is a key for the Rockies this year. I think, again, he's part of that springboard we've been talking about today into 2026, but absolutely he has to return back to form. And if he does, that's a very positive development for the Rockies.
Yeah, I was talking to Brenton Doyle on our show on Friday week, and he talked a little bit about Nolan Jones. And He talked about some of the other outfielders too, but he was saying to me both on and off air when we were talking before and after. Jones is one of the hardest working guys, in the outfield for the Rockies. Like, he's a guy who puts his best foot forward. Yeah, you can go have fun, in between games, and like he'll have fun out there on the field, in warmups and stuff like that. He's like, but he's business. He takes care of his business, and he's one of the hardest workers in that Rockies organization. And so I do think Nolan Jones has the ability to bounce back. And again, if we can get Nolan Jones back to what he was his rookie season with the Rockies, that outfield is stacked. You've got, a most likely third Gold Glove / maybe new All-Star in Brent Doyle at center field. You've got, Nolan Jones playing left field, who, again, could be an incredible both bat and outfielder. And then you've got your third outfield spot, which as of now looks like it's Jordan Beck, but you have Zach Veen that can get mixed in there as well. Like, the Rockies outfield is one of the bright spots of their entire team, outfield and infield, really. So if you can solidify him as a piece that you don't have to worry about, really, moving forward, I think that would be huge for the Rockies. And it just, again, checks a box, right? Like, we checked the box with Michael Toglia, check the box with Ezekiel Tovar, check the box with Brent Doyle. If we can add another one of those to the list with Nolan Jones having a consistent season across the board, I think that'll be huge. I'm also really poised for a good building season for Michael Toglia next year too. Throwing his name out there, because he got a lot better last year. I think he has the chance to be a Gold Glove first baseman, which we've talked about a couple times too. But this defensive set for the Rockies is solid. I think they're going to be a really good defensive team next year.
Yeah, there are steps to be taken from Tovar, from Toglia. There's guys that you look at on the roster, and Jordan Beck is a good example as well. Obviously had to deal with the injury last year. It really threw things off. So a full season of Jordan Beck and what he can do, I'm excited to see what that'll be. So I think there's a lot of places where you can look and say, if this happens, it would be a very good thing. But there are probably none of them higher than Jones and be able to put his bat in the middle of the lineup and it'd be a consistent bat again next year.
Yeah, I know. That top 4 or 5 hitters in the lineup for the Rockies could be pretty solid for years to come if they can hit their peak. And I know, the Rockies offense needs a lot of work. I sit here almost I sit here almost contradictory, wearing a shirt that says Colorado Rakes when the Rockies had the worst offense in all of baseball that last year. So, hey, they'll get back to it one day. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier, but we can only hope, right? We're just trying to send good vibes out there into the world. But, I know I might be in the minority, and you're probably with me on this too, Kevin. I'm excited for next year because my expectations are realistic. I don't expect the Rockies to go win a World Series next year. I don't expect them to make it to the playoffs, but I do see next year being a year in which they can move forward. And so, later in the offseason, we'll talk about our goals. We'll get specific on, what types of things, what we want to see and that kind of stuff. But I think from what we're looking at right now in this offseason, a lot of Rockies fans are freaking out saying, oh my gosh, it's been a terrible offseason. They've done kind of what I expected them to do so far. Yeah. So I'm not happy about it, but I'm also not freaking out about it. I think the Rockies are staying the course.
If you knew going into next year that the Rockies actually had a plan and were actually going to stick to that plan, and that things along that plan worked for them to build a plan for 26, I think that's a lot of progress in the eyes of Rockies fans, honestly. For so many years, people were going, what is this franchise doing? And you're starting to see now this plan come together of what they think they can do in order to compete. Again, it may not be an NL West title, but if they can sneak into the postseason and be really confident that they could cause some trouble, hey, I think that would be a huge step forward.
That would be huge. Well, we're going to wrap things up here on the show. Kevin, it is a pleasure as always. Writer for Just Baseball. Check him out. He does not only Rocky stuff, but all of Major League Baseball and beyond. So, Kevin, thanks again for joining us on the show.
Always a pleasure, man. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yep, happy Thanksgiving to you as well. And happy Thanksgiving to you guys at home. Thanks for hanging out with us. Even you, Salsa Wolf. I know you're bitter, but one day, Rockies will prove you wrong. It might not be anytime soon, but one day. Fingers crossed. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Be sure to check out some of our Black Friday deals. We've got some big Black Friday sales on shirts like this and more coming up soon. You can follow us on Twitter at DNVR_Rockies. to figure out more information for that. Also, DNVR Sports has more information on all the other sports in Denver and all the Black Friday deals we have coming up. That's going to do it for us on the podcast. We'll see you guys next time. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
We all silly like the mayor.